This is the CHGO Cubs podcast. My name is Corey, and today I am joined by our good friend Kevin Wells, filling in for Brendan. And we are coming to you live on Sunday, August 11th. And Kevin, just as we suspected weeks ago, the Cubs are just one game under 500. They are a mere 3 games out of a playoff spot. They have jumped the Pirates, the Reds. They are nearing the Giants and Cardinals. And, 40-something games left in the season, and we have a playoff race to talk about.
I was going to say just as we expected or just as you expected?
Definitely not me, but
I was going to say, I think we were on the same wavelength. I thought this team was dead in the water. Yeah, they rejuvenated themselves. Good weekend against the White Sox. Good week against some interleague opponents. There's a lot to be. There's a lot of promising statistics too behind these wins that I think is more so of a good sign. They haven't gotten lucky in these games.
yeah,
The
I
offense is there,
mean,
the bullpen is there. Yeah, there's reason to believe now. There really is.
look, I've talked about on recent episodes that, even during the worst stretches we've seen from this team, I would look at the standings and say, well, as we head toward the trade deadline, they're only 5.5 out, or they're only 6 out. And, so much of that was met with like, give it up, they stink, blah, blah, blah. And it was really just the National League is bad. And if you're in the race, you're in the race. And as the Cubs have continued to play better baseball over the last few weeks, and that's something that Kevin and I are going to talk about on this episode, kind of what's keyed that, what are the keys to sustaining that as the Cubs enter this last kind of home stretch of the season. But you look at the standings now, just sort of setting the table of where this race sits. And oddly, Kevin, I think Cody tweeted it out from the CHGO Cubs Twitter handle. I think the first time since 1932, he said, that the Cubs haven't played on a Sunday. So very weird that you and I are talking about the Cubs on a Sunday where they didn't play any baseball. That was very weird.
Really, 1932? Wow. You know what's interesting? I was sitting. I went to the Air and Water show today. You might be able to see some sunburn on my face. But I was sitting there the whole time thinking about, well, this is interesting. There's going to be no flyover at Wrigley today. Usually, the Air and Water show is one of the best weekends of the year to go to a Cubs game,
Yeah.
because you kind of get two shows in one. That's interesting. 100. It does feel strange just because I don't know, synonymous with summertime here, Sundays in the Cubs. But listen, any day off that they can get at this point, especially ahead of a big series, is a good thing. It's weird that that they didn't play, but they do have a couple days off coming up here too, if I'm not mistaken. This one, and they have another one this week, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to look at this
Yes, on Thursday.
Thursday. So
Yeah. Thursday and then next Monday.
the schedule's kind of shaking out nicely for them here.
Yeah.
This is going to be a good litmus test coming up this week. But after that, it's like, well, gee, I can win that game. You could probably win that game, maybe that one too. So
Yeah. So we'll take a look at the schedule. We'll take a look at everything. Just looking at now, I think there are still some games. The Mets are playing this evening, I believe, on Sunday Night Baseball. So that is obviously an important one, as the Mets are currently tied with the Braves for that last wild card spot. But just sort of setting the table of where this is at. The Diamondbacks and Padres have also been playing good baseball. So they are each 4 games up on that third spot, and then everybody behind them. Atlanta and New York tied at that third spot, 5 games over 500 each. Cardinals and Giants a game and a half back, and then it is your Chicago Cubs at 3 games back. The next team kind of coming at the heels of that wild card spot. So looking at it, it does feel like you're really it's that third wild card or bust. Arizona looks like they're playing good baseball. San Diego too. And to overcome 7 games on either of those teams or each of those teams would be very tough. 3 games, however, on a Braves team that is playing like absolute garbage. The New York Mets, who are the New York Mets, and the Cardinals and Giants, who I think, when you look at them, do we really feel like they're better than the Chicago Cubs? Not at
I was
all.
I was just gonna say that I think that there's like 3 teams. I know it looks daunting when you look at the standings, how many teams are technically above you at the moment in time. but one of those teams has a negative 50 run differential. And quite
Yeah,
frankly, you dominated last week and should have swept in a 4-game series. The Cardinals shouldn't worry you in the slightest. I don't think that they might find themselves in there. Baseball's a weird sport, but to me, the teams you're circling, the Diamondbacks look really good right now. The Giants are 8-2 in their last 10. It's the Giants, the Padres, and the Cubs, and those teams are all 8-2 in their last 10 games. So the hot teams, the NL West, those are formidable opponents. But the Cardinals and the Mets are a good team. They got some star power, but I can't remember if Kodai Senga has been destined to return yet. They still have some questions in their rotation. Yeah, there's only a couple teams that I'm really worried about. The Braves have played some pretty crappy baseball right now. The reason that gives me optimism for them is, I mean, they don't the obvious, right? They don't have their MVP and they don't have their Cy Young caliber Spencer Strider. They're both done
right.
for the year. So yeah, I
It's
like the Cubs' chances at this moment.
Look, I think it's been a very strange season, and I think a lot of us will continue to be frustrated that some of the, off-season concerns or complaints, whatever they may be, kind of, it is hard for me not to look at this and think, man, if you had just addressed certain things in the offseason, you'd be running away with a playoff spot. You'd be in the thick of the division, and the National League is terrible. So you shouldn't be mired in this mess of bad teams. You could have made some moves to be better than that, but that's a discussion for another day. There's only there's a certain number of games left here, and they're in it. And at certain points of this season, that seemed absolutely impossible to think that the Cubs would be within striking distance of a playoff race and a playoff spot. And they're right there. So obviously they have you guys have heard it from our shows, social media, etc. They have a very favorable schedule. I believe the most favorable schedule the rest of the way in terms of the combined win percentage of the teams that they're playing. They're playing better baseball, and you can make up 3 games in a week. We see teams do that all the time. The Cubs just jumped a few teams in short order over the last couple weeks. So anything is possible. And whatever everybody thinks about this team, I know there's going to be some people that, kind of have that, well, even if they get in, they'll get beat around by the Phillies or they can't compete with this team. But that's who cares? The point is to get in. And at this point in the season, we can save the discussion of how they built the roster, how they did this, how they did that for another time. At this point, there's 43 games left. You're 3 games out. Let's go. Let's ride. Let's try to make the playoffs. That's where we're at. And it's, we're going to get into some of the specifics of who's playing better. But I think uh, when you look at the way this team has been playing baseball for the last few weeks, maybe close to a month, it gives you a lot more confidence that they can have they can continue playing this way and that they're a more complete team. Are they perfect? Are they a juggernaut? No, that's not going to happen overnight, and you may still see some of those inconsistencies from the offense, and you may see some regression from a bullpen that has suddenly been the best in baseball for the last few weeks. But they're playing a better brand of baseball than we were all freaking out and yelling at them for making errors every night and getting thrown out on the bases every night and scoring 0 runs every other day. Like it's a better brand of baseball. Where it gets us, I don't know, but we got to kind of lock in here. Like this is a playoff race, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean 7-2 in August. So great offensive start. I think for the first and foremost is offensively getting some of the bottom of the order hitters back, getting Dansby back on has been huge. And you're right. And thanks to John in the chat, Senga is down for the season when we're talking about the Mets. So yeah, that's a team with a bunch of question marks. This Cubs team they are a competitive bunch, I think, and they have a steady hand at manager, a guy who has had great success in August and September in his managerial career dating back about a decade. So they haven't changed. I think every interview that you've heard, they haven't really changed the dynamic in that locker. Every time Ryan has joined us post game to talk about has the vibe changed, this, that, and the other. Craig gets asked about it on every radio hit he does, and he says, "Hey, we got another baseball game today." And honestly, they put themselves in this hole. And you're right, they didn't set themselves up for success at the beginning of the year. So they put themselves in this hole to where that's all you can really think about is you got to go out and win the rest of the series that you can. You're at 59 wins. I still say the magic number is 85, 26 more wins. And you have what? There's 43 games left. Yeah. So 26 and 17. That's what you got to be shooting for, right? 85 wins might not be enough, but I think that that's the good shooting point number you should be looking at 85, 86 wins. And it's definitely possible. The only thing that I would worry about is, can you keep getting contributions from Miguel Amaya, Pete Crow-Armstrong, and some of these guys who really have not hit the whole year? But right now, the signs are promising. Pete's not swinging at a bunch of garbage. He's swinging at things in the zone. He's hitting the ball harder. Miguel Amaya had 2 hits yesterday, including the game-winning hit. I mean, there's promising signs. And the way they knocked around Garrett Crochet, the
Yeah.
best freaking pitcher in baseball this year, they killed him 2 nights ago. I mean, all of these little things. It's not oh, you just beat the White Sox, whatever. No, you just beat a guy who was in contention for the Cy Young, and you killed it. You hit 4 or 5 home runs against him. All promising signs.
Yeah, and look, I think it's fair to point out that, they seem in some of these games to have struggled to beat the White Sox. It's been kind of a struggle at times, even back at Wrigley Field in the first series with those teams. But at the end of the day, especially when you're in this tight of a race, like, you just got to rack up wins. It doesn't matter that you beat the White Sox by 1. It doesn't matter that you had the bases loaded and Hector Neris had to escape again. You just got to keep racking up W's. You're going to be playing, coming up in this stretch, you're going to be playing some of the worst teams in the league. You're going to get, the Nationals, the Marlins. You're going to get, when you roll over into September, you've got some games with the Rockies, the A's, the Nationals again. Like, doesn't matter if you beat them by 10. It doesn't matter if you beat them by 1. It just matters that you beat them. And we'll see what this team is made of. I think we all knew that when this team was at its worst, that they were better than that. How much better, obviously up for debate. But they were never that bad. And we talked so much about what the value would be to this team if Dansby just hit to his career norms, the back of his baseball card, if you got any production out of the catcher position from whoever happened to be playing that day. It didn't really matter. If you got Cody Bellinger healthy and performing not even to the full level of last year, but just better than he had been, more in line with what the Cubs were paying him, it's definitely something we talked about for a reason, because it wasn't asking that much. You weren't asking MVPs to get out of, come out of nowhere and perform at levels that you haven't seen. You were really just asking guys to not be worse than, their worst season so far in Major League Baseball. And over the last few weeks, you see that as Dansby Swanson, you look at Dansby's last 30 games, hitting 305 with an OPS, up near, the 780s, how big of an impact that has. You see Miguel Amaya over his last, 30 games, he's still not a great hitter. He's never going to be a great hitter. But there was a point where he was giving you nothing. Your entire catcher position was giving you absolutely nothing. And you see even just those opportunities where he can come in and get a hit and give you a little bit on offense, how much value that has. And then, as you mentioned, Kevin, like PCA over his last 15, the OPS near 800, over 800. He's a machine on the base paths. He's an unbelievable center fielder, but you're also starting to see the adjustments being made by him at the plate. Obviously, when he first came up, we talked so much about how it was such a difficult position for one of the youngest players in the league to come in the middle of a playoff race and have to try to figure out how to hit major league pitching. And he didn't. He was very late on fastballs. He looked a little overmatched. And he had to square that with, well, his development. He's young, but we're trying to win, and we're seeing what happens. This year, it's taken some time, but that's why you got to be patient. And now you're finally seeing him hit the ball with authority. He's going the other way with pitches on the outer half of the zone. He's putting the ball in the alley. He's, like I said, hitting the ball on a line, hitting it with authority. And he's going to get those cheapies. He's going to be able to hit some weak grounders or bloops that his legs allow him to turn into hits. But seeing that development really starting to click, where he's putting up those better at bats, he's putting better swings on the ball, that, not just for 2024, is incredibly exciting. Because if that man can hit anything like he did in the minors, he is an unbelievably valuable player as we go forward here. But for 2024, just not having that bottom portion of the lineup be a complete like death march, it makes a big difference, Kevin.
I want to point out a couple of things. The Pete Crow-Armstrong thing, you and I were on the same wavelength a couple of months ago. I remember I watched your and Brendan's show right when it was, there was a couple injuries. Who should be in there? Should they call up Pete? Should they not? And I want to make this really clear. Pete Crow-Armstrong was part of their best 9 on opening day, and he wasn't here. Now, the roster didn't allow for that. The Cubs hit really well in March and April, and fitting Pete in and giving him everyday at bats would have been difficult. But if I'm looking back a little bit, they should have done it, because you would have had that production. You would have had those growing pains early on, and maybe you're getting even better hitter in that month of July, and when you weren't hitting anything. And that's in the past. It's done. It's what's really exciting is about the immediate impact that Pete makes in every single game. He's a part of every single game, and even though he goes hitless yesterday, the energy and emotion, he plays with his hair on fire. All of that does mean stuff. I know it's not a it's not a measurable statistic, but he impacts winning. He is a winning player. He's a gamer. He's on first base and he's on second. He hasn't been thrown out yet. I mean, the guy, he's learning how to hit. It's going to take a while. There's going to be another couple slumps here.
Yeah.
It happens with these young players. But I'm telling you, it's exciting for next year. But for this year, if they get into the postseason, or if they're playing these really difficult games in the last couple of weeks of September, Pete's going to have a lot to do with winning on this team. He is an electric playmaker, and he's turning into a really good hitter. It's not going to happen overnight. He's 22. But yeah, am I disappointed he wasn't here a couple of months ago and they could have used him? Yeah, I am. I stand on that. I still think that he was ready that moment in time, and he could have impacted winning at a time where you were really struggling to score runs, and you were still employing guys on the roster that simply were not getting the job done and are not Major League Baseball players. And sure enough, those guys are not on the team anymore. I'm talking about a couple guys in particular, but you finally have a roster full, a lineup that you look at every day and you say, this is a playoff caliber lineup. Now they're finally playing to it. It's nice to see. And I think Pete Crow-Armstrong has a lot to do with that, especially at the bottom of the lineup.
Yeah, and I mean, look, he's one of those players who, if you can get into the playoffs, is especially valuable because of the chaos that he causes. You're often in low-scoring games. You're facing some of the best pitchers in baseball. Teams condensing their rosters. They're using their best relievers every day. And a guy that is that dangerous and that dangerous on the base paths is sort of that X factor that, sometimes teams have those players on the depth of their bench and they can't hit, they can't field, they can't do anything but run. PCA is, showing an ability to do it all. The bat, obviously, again, as you said, there will continue to be adjustments, there will be slumps, et cetera, et cetera. But he's showing you that ability that he's putting it together. He's putting those better swings on the ball. He hit in the minors, and I think a lot of us always believed he would be able to do that in the majors, but you throw a 22-year-old out there, it's tough to have that happen right away, and you got to be patient with it. So you're sort of starting to see the fruits of that. But I loved I think it was the second game against the White Sox, when he came up with runners, I think on first and second, and AJ Pierzynski was on the broadcast talking about, whether he would bunt, and given how well he's been hitting, would you let him swing away? And I forget who the other, the main broadcaster was. Yeah. He was like, well, he seems to have just as much of an ability to get a hit, even if he does bunt. And that's what I was thinking watching. And I was like, he can do whatever he wants. Normally, I'm not a fan of bunting, but he's liable to get a hit even if he is bunting. So it sort of works both ways. But that's been a very exciting development, and one, like I said, that's not just for the immediate, but as we go forward here, PCA being able to develop at the plate is one of those things that has a huge impact on the way the Cubs build this roster going forward. and just what this franchise looks like going forward. And our guy Cody Bellinger in the chat, PCA on Friday was electric. I also want to take just a second. Shout out to our guy Cody, who I think has hosted 1,000 shows this week. He's done events. He's gone to games. Late show on Saturday. We'll give a little hat tip to our guy Cody Bellinger, putting in the work for the CHGO Cubs team, doing what he has to do to get this team into the playoffs. So,
Cody has been. Cody has worn a lot of hats, and he's done them all very nicely.
Yeah.
And you're right; he is doing his part to get us all back in. He kind of reeled me back in on Friday when we were doing the watch along together. I really wanted to be out, but Cody's Twitter and
Well,
himself.
and so and that's a question I'm curious as we go through here. We have a lot of people in the chat. We appreciate you guys joining us on a Sunday. Hopefully, we can fill that void of no Cubs baseball Sunday, which still feels very weird. I remember when I was getting ready to, plan the show and see what time we were going to do this show on Sunday. I looked at the schedule and there's just a blank square. And I was like, what? Like, it's a Sunday though. They always play on Sunday. They have to play on Sunday. So this is weird. It's felt weird all day. It kind of feels like a Monday or something like that because there's no Cubs
weird
baseball.
Too that they've had these 2-game sets with the White Sox. I just don't. Just make it a full series. I don't understand. I mean, I guess scheduling shakes out. You got to play every team now. I'm sure that is something. But yeah, the 2-game series on both sides of town is just weird to me. Just play a full series. I don't know.
Yeah.
Play a full series.
Yeah. And so, I do see in our YouTube chat, I get sidetracked so easily. What I was going to ask the YouTube chat, 59 and 60, we've all, it's been a roller coaster this entire season of how we felt about this team, how confident we are in this team. If you're watching live on YouTube, and if you're listening later on your podcast feeds, tweet at us, me, Kevin, the CHGO Cubs Twitter handle. Are you back in? Are you bought in on we are in a playoff race and I'm watching every game with playoff aspirations and I don't care how the beginning of the season went, let's make the playoffs? Or are you still kind of I don't trust this team, they're going to mess it up, they're still not that good? Where are you all on how you feel about this? Because I'm curious. It's been I find myself sort of in the middle, Kevin. I think, as I said, when this team was at its worst, I knew they were better than that. I never thought this team was, one of the best teams or rosters in the league or anything like that. But they played some horrible baseball. And I remember some of the episodes where we were particularly angry when they were making multiple errors a game, getting thrown out on the bases, bad sends, bad reads, all these other things. We were angry because they should have been better than that. It was a team built on defense. It was a team built on fundamentals. You brought in a manager with a reputation for winning close games, being good on those little marginal things that we talk about so much, and they were horrible at them for a significant period of this year. We knew the offense would be inconsistent, and we've yelled at Jed about that, and we'll continue to do that. But the other stuff didn't fit with how they were built and who some of these players are. So as they're playing better baseball, a lot of it is yeah, okay, finally. Finally, Dansby is he's not a great hitter, but he's not a 60 WRC plus hitter like he was for the first 3 months of this season. And there's any number of, kind of examples like that. At the same time, it does feel a little hard to trust them. I feel like we've been kind of burned by them a little bit this year. And I understand. I'm looking at our YouTube chat and I'm seeing a lot of, they still don't hit with runners in scoring position. They still have trouble executing some of those situational hitting moments. And yeah, I think so where I am, Kevin, and then I'm curious totally where you are, is they're still a flawed team. They're not overnight just because they're playing better, an excellent team with no flaws and no potential for slumps or anything like that. But they were always a team that was right in that area of potential, and when you looked at the projections, even coming into the year, like a kind of fringe playoff team. And that's what they feel like. They feel like they have a lot of good stuff on this roster, They're not amazing. They're not, as you said, a world beater or anything like that. But they were always better than that, and they're right in the thick of it. So I think as you look forward, a bad schedule, teams playing better, you've gotten so much healthier just on the whole in terms of how this roster looks. I'm in. It doesn't mean I think this team is flawless, but 3 games out, they're playing better baseball and more in line with how I kind of saw them coming into the year. So I guess that's where I am. It's some sort of weird like middle ground. I don't fully trust them, but here we are.
Well, you're an objective fan, and I'd like to think that I align with that because it's okay to it's okay to enjoy the Cubs when they go on these runs, and it's okay to be really irrationally angry when they struggle and they haven't made the playoffs in a couple of years. It makes sense with the market that they're in. You want to act like big market team, and quite frankly, they haven't. But to answer your question, I'm a little bit more in than I am. Like, I think I'm a little bit farther along than you are. I believe a little bit more just because of some of the signs that I've seen. The Garrett Crochet thing, right away, was something where I was like, "Whoa, holy cow!" Like, that that guy gave up one extra base hit to lefties all year. Pete smokes a double I think a triple off of him. Cody Bellinger hit a double and a home run off of him, and they put up a bunch of runs on him right away. That sparked something in me. That's like, okay, you're going to face that caliber pitching if you do make the wild card round. You're going to face those types of guys in the first round. So that was a big thing for me because I was worried that was a game they were going to lose. I am not a full believer, however. I'm going to push back just a little bit because,
Sure.
yes, it's the White Sox, and they gave you two really hard fought games. They played very good baseball, the White Sox defensively. They couldn't really put anybody in offensively, but defensively, and they played a pretty tough series against you this weekend, and you weathered the storm and you won, and your bullpen was great. But where I will push back on is just little things on the line again. There's just been a few too many miscues in the outfield still for me. And Cody Bellinger getting waved around by Willie Harris, and there just being no throw by Nicky Lopez, who's just
Yeah.
surrendered by the White Sox. I mean, you got a
Yeah.
little lucky there. That that happens. You're going to play teams, and they're gonna let you off the hook there. They don't. The slug's kind of coming. Ian Happ is starting to really hit the ball over the wall. Bellinger's gotten a couple in the last couple weeks. But I'm not here to say that this team is going to for sure make the playoffs and they're going to win a series or even get in. I think that there's still the flaws are still very much
Sure.
there, even when they're winning right now. There's
Yeah.
still little things on the line. There's just it's not a fluid product, and I
Yeah.
don't think it will be this year.
No. Well, and so it's a weird this is a tough thing to, I think, fully articulate, and I apologize if I didn't articulate my position well, just because 'cause I'm reading the chat, and I don't know if I did, based on some of the responses. Like I said, I don't think what I meant was in terms of buying in, I mean, I think they're capable of playing well enough to win a wild card race in a year where the National League is horrible. I don't all of a sudden think this is a great team or that they're gonna win the World Series or anything like that. I just think they are capable of playing well enough to beat out a Braves team that is hurt and played terrible baseball. I think before the other day, they had lost 7 in a row. They just blew a 7-2 lead in Colorado to the Rockies to lose today. Very flawed and injured New York Mets team and a very flawed Cardinals and Giants team. I'm not rewriting how I feel, and I saw Cody in the YouTube chat echo a sentiment that I also believe, which is it doesn't change how I felt about how they went about the offseason or how they built this team or any of that. I still feel that way. All I'm saying is they're in this race, and I think they have the tools, the players and the manager and et cetera, to navigate a short wild card sprint to the end of the season. That's all I'm saying. All I'm saying is I don't expect them to play 10-30 baseball for the next month and a half and just completely disappear. I think they're capable of hanging in a bad wild card race. That's what I think they're capable of. Now, what we didn't really talk about, a little bit we did in setting the table, like they don't own the tie break with, I think, any of these teams. And it is hard to jump 4 teams, even if you're right there with them. It's hard to outplay 4 different teams over this period of time, especially because unless I'm mistaken, you don't play any of these teams. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think that I
You
am.
play the Pirates twice, but they're below you. I don't know if they're done with
Yeah,
the
no
Padres.
Mets, no Giants, no Cardinals, and no Braves. So
Yeah,
you're not gonna have any ability to kind of address this on your own. And yeah, so that's more my position. I don't think anybody all of a sudden thinks this is some awesome team and
no,
what happened for the first 3 months doesn't matter or anything. Of course it does, but I just think this team is capable of hanging in this race and playing well enough to make it interesting. You're looking at a year where, like you said, Kevin, it might be 83 to 86 wins that get somebody in the playoffs. And like just looking at it, I think the Cubs can get there. It
there's a couple things I want to add to that really
Sure.
quick. Optimistically wise, if you're looking for reasons to believe right now, the Cubs, and this is hard statistical data. The Cubs have given up 493 runs this year. The only other team above you that's given up less than that is the Braves at 469. I mean, you do have the 3 workhorse starting pitchers to win you ball games. Justin Steele didn't have his best stuff yesterday and still had 8 strikeouts and threw 100 pitches and gave you a quality start. You have the workhorses to get you there. Whereas I look at some of these other teams, they don't. So the Cubs can lean on the fact that they do have one of the best starting rotations in the entire National League. The other thing, or you mentioned the manager, late in the season, Craig Counsell has been awesome. He's been great in August and he's been great in September. Craig Counsell in September since 2015, 140 and 103 in September. That's a 57% winning percentage, 57 winning percentage. In August, I don't have it exactly, but he's above 500 in August too. And now he had a couple teams, in 2018 when, that was game 163. Or excuse me, was that 2019? I can't remember. It was one of both of those seasons. The 2018-19 Brewers, both of those teams went 19-7 and 20-7 in September, and those teams were better than the team that you're fielding today, right now. They had an MVP and they were a better team put together. However, Craig is never the only time he was under 500 in September was in 2015 when he had a terrible team, and he was not even he didn't even manage the full year. So really, if you're going from 2016 on when he was the manager for full 7 seasons, he's never had a losing September. There is something to that. He's the same guy every day. I think that every player that you've heard talk about him, whether it be on the radio or on these broadcasts, has said the same thing about him. It's a steady hand. I want to live in the moment of the game that we're playing in. We're human. Of course, we're looking at the standings and things like that, but it really is about he just wants to win the game that they're playing. And it's such a cliche thing to say in sports, but Craig actually, he says it every single time and he seems to have that same demeanor. And I think that means something when you are at one point, you're 9 games out and now you find yourself a lot closer. So there are 2 things. The pitching staff and the manager are 2 big positives going into this spin, and your schedule is favorable. The offense is still a question mark. You got shut out by the Twins last week. I'm not here to say that they're gonna be great offensively, and those guys. That's the question mark still is the
Yeah.
offense, and that's been the question mark all year.
Yeah, and I see our good friend Godfather in the YouTube chat, and one of those things that is going to be interesting to watch as they go over these next few weeks, especially playing as many bad teams as they are, is one of the things that I was really frustrated about. You talked about how well they hit Garrett Crochet and then did nothing against Chris Flexen. And if you'll recall, they faced Chris Flexen, I think, a couple times last year when he was with the Rockies, and they needed to just win games against dumpster pitching. Couldn't do it either. And so that's one of those areas where, as we go forward here against bad teams, you have got to capitalize on playing bad teams. And when I was watching the game on Friday, when they loaded the bases and Neris is in and barely escaping, I said to my mom, like, and I felt the same when they were thinking about blowing that game at Wrigley, and Talkman ends up hitting the walk-off grand slam, or they, had to come back. Any other team but the White Sox, and I think they lose those games. Like, watching that ninth inning, the only thing I'm thinking is, like, that this would be a game where everyone would be going, well, they're going to blow it. Here we go again, except it's the White Sox. They're, like, so bad that they can't even, they can't overcome that,
Did
right?
you see that statistic on the broadcast yesterday that the White Sox haven't had a comeback win after, I believe, the seventh inning all year?
Yeah,
I mean, when
yeah,
they were trailing, I think it was either this, I can't remember what inning it was, so don't quote me on this. This is verbatim, but they were like 0 and like 70 something after trailing after a game. So you knew that, yeah,
yeah.
you were feeling pretty good about it. But you're right, it wasn't a batten down.
Yeah.
You didn't have it happen.
So as we go forward here, especially, and you play some good teams too. Like I'm dialed in as I look at the schedule. You have that stretch where you're at home against the Pirates and the Yankees to start September. Have to assume that we're going to get Skeens, and the Cubs have struggled to hit Pirates pitching. So even though the Pirates are kind of slowly playing themselves out of the wild card race, although they're still in it as well, you figure that might be a tough series because you might face some really good pitching. But then you have the Yankees, and then you go to LA to play the Dodgers. That might be the stretch that defines this season. That could be a very tough 9-game stretch. But when you look around and you're going to play the A's, you're going to play the Nationals, you have a homestand in the middle of September where it's 7 games against the A's and the Nationals, two of the worst teams in the league. That has got to be a stretch where we don't see performances from the offense like we did on Saturday. When you get a bad starter with bad numbers, who everybody else in the league is jumping all over, you have to jump all over them and you have to win those games. And that's how this weekend felt. It was only 2 games, and it's hard to say, well, this is a must win or it's not, but it did feel that way. It's like if you lose a game to a team that just lost 20 games in a row, this whole thing is pointless. Like, you have to clean up and rack up these wins and move on to the next game. And how they play against great teams, even if they did make the playoffs, how they would play, I have no idea, guys. Like, I don't know, but I'm just trying to get there. It's nice to, whatever you think about this team. And I see Edward in the chat said, I'd rather be having these discussions than the discussions and the situation that the White Sox are in. And that's kind of how I feel. Like, you guys have heard me all season, all off season. I've been pissed off at this team. I've been angry at this team. I've been mad at the general, the president. I've been mad at the shortstop. I've been mad at everybody. But at the end of the day, I just want to get in. I just want to make the playoffs. And it's a lower bar than I'd like to have for this organization. It's not the bar that I, had when we were coming into this season, but here we are. It's mid-August. They're 3 games out, and I want to see them make the playoffs. So I'm focused on how do they make that happen, and is that possible? And it does feel like it is.
Yeah, thanks to Edward in the chat. 0 and 67 for the White Sox when trailing after 7 innings. Heck yeah, I would rather have this conversation.
Yeah.
Like, are we serious? Like, that's a dead end team, man, with no future right now. They've built their farm system up a little bit, but yeah, this is a conversation that we'd much rather have. The Cubs have played themselves back in. That's the moral of a 162 game baseball season. They didn't lay down. They had a horrible July, and credit to all those guys. They didn't blow up at each other. They hung in there, and they are still there. Yes, Godfather, I
Yeah.
know they're a game under 500 still. It stinks. But guess what? A month ago, they were 9 games under 500, or eight or
Well,
9 games under 500. They're,
you
they're,
know,
they're
and look, like, you don't control what the division or what the league is doing. I always like to go back to 2015 as a good example. The Cubs won 97 games in 2015. They didn't even finish in second place in their own division. They finished in third. They had
Yeah.
to go on the road and beat a team, which they did, thanks to Jake Arrieta and Kyle Schwarber. They had to go on the road and beat a team in their own division to then go on the road and play another team in their own division. Sometimes, and then you go back to like 2003, the formative years of my Cubs fandom. The Cubs won the division with 88 games. Things happen. So yeah, they're a game under 500, but that puts them near a playoff spot. In another year or in another league or another situation, they'd be 10 games out and we wouldn't be having this conversation and it wouldn't matter. But they played better baseball in this second half. They played better in the last few weeks. And that's what I'm choosing to focus on. And like I said, I expect the fan base to have a lot of different perspectives on this. I don't think that, looking in our YouTube chat, like Godfather is alone in thinking I'm not buying into this. They still don't have a reliable closer. Although our good friend Brendan Miller has some Hector Neris stats he can share for you that can skew that narrative if you want. But like, they're still going to be inconsistent on offense. They didn't hit Chris Flexen today, of course. But then there's going to be some folks that are like, I don't care. They're playing better. I'm excited at what PCA is doing. It's nice to see Dansby hitting again. And let's see if they can play good baseball for 3.5 weeks or excuse me, 5.5 weeks and make the playoffs. And that's where we're at. So I do, a couple things I want to talk about as we head toward the stretch run of this podcast episode as well. We talked about Dansby playing better and how important that is to stabilizing the lineup. We talked about PCA and the catcher position, even just providing something, and making those steps to not just having a 7 through 9 in your order that are just automatic outs or a black hole, whatever you want to call it. But one thing in particular, two things in particular I want to draw attention to. One is that we have to figure out how to bottle up whatever is happening in the second half in back-to-back years now. Is it the weather? Is it having played enough games that he's feeling right or whatever? But something about Seiya Suzuki in the second half is something we have got to bottle up. And, it's like Michael's secret stuff in Space Jam. I don't know what happens in the second half, but you guys know me. I've long since he signed been a believer in Seiya, a defender of Seiya, and a believer in that bat. And boy, is he on an absolute heater. And to see him kind of pick up where he left off when he came back from that little sit down last year, came back, against the Mets and went on a tear. And we're seeing something very similar from him this year. Last 30 games, 870 OPS. Last 15 games, even higher than that, pushing up toward 900. Like, this guy is a force in this lineup, especially in the second half. And his being consistent in that way, but also pushing towards being that like really valuable bat, not just a good bat, but a great bat in this lineup is obviously extraordinarily important to the way we're seeing this offense perform, at least not all the time, but with more relativity than we did in the beginning of the year.
The Seiya thing is such a key. I'll use Jed's quote here, playing for 2024 and beyond, helping us this year and beyond. Seiya is, I still am a believer that Cody Bellinger is the best hitter on the team when he's healthy and right.
Yeah.
But Seiya has way more power than Bellinger does. Hits the ball a lot harder. Those statistics, those make you a better believer in the type of player that he can continue to be. You're right. I don't know what it is about the second half of the year and why he goes through stretches where he's just completely lost at the plate. But he is a massive part of what this team could be next year, too. Because let's be honest, we know offensively they don't have a slugger, they don't have a star. We've talked about it on every single show that we've ever had. And we don't know if they're going to add one in this offseason. You don't know. And the trade deadline's gone. You're not getting one for the stretch run here. Seiya Suzuki's success at the plate is paramount to this team. And you're right, he's on a heater. I'm trying to find his some of his statistics here. He's top 10 in OPS in all of Major League outfielders right now. He's number 10 at 815 in all of baseball. That's damn good. Like that's what you signed him to be.
Yeah.
Um, it's paramount. He has to hit the ball out of the ballpark. Last night, hopefully, just a little blip, 0 for 5. Funny enough, the whole Cubs lineup, everybody in the lineup had a hit yesterday except for PCA and Seiya, two of the guys who have been absolutely ripping the cover off the ball. Just goes to show you how silly of a game baseball is when
Yeah.
you play a team like the White Sox and you go hitless. But uh, Seiya and to a certain extent, Ian Happ too. Ian Happ, I believe, leads the team in homers, and he's really starting to hit the ball out of the ballpark. And I feel like he's had some really good stretch runs here. You're right. I'm sure the weather has to do with it. I'm sure just general being out there all the time. But if they can find the thing that makes Seiya most comfortable every day, that's you're gonna have to give him the same schedule every single day. I don't know what it's gonna take, but his success is paramount because they need a guy to give you the extra base hits. The Cubs don't have a lot of guys who give you a bunch of extra base hits. If you take this month out of it, say as a guy that comes up there and you think right away that he's a guy that can put one in the gap or over the wall almost every time up. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I totally agree. Could
Since
not agree more.
Since July 1st, a 142 WRC plus, that is the best on the team, ahead of just Michael Bush by a little bit. So Seiya, finding that consistency, and I see it in the YouTube chat. I don't know how to help him catch routine fly balls. I don't know what the problem is there. Maybe he's a DH. I don't know. But what I do know is that he's put together some really good stuff at the plate. He has his struggles. He has those periods where he looks a little lost. But on the whole, he's a good major league hitter. And, we've certainly seen guys, whether it's prospects that come up, guys that come over from Japan, et cetera, that just peter out. They never put together a good offensive production or show an ability to hit major league pitching. And Seiya is not one of those guys. Like, he's been with you for a few years now, and the dude can hit. And he's been incredibly important to kind of stabilizing this lineup. As you mentioned, when Cody's been hurt or when Cody came back and was obviously, I think, sort of still dealing with some of the lingering things from that rib injury, and wasn't able to carry this lineup like he did last year. On
Agnon in the chat really quick. He had a good thing. Should say a DH though, and I think that is a really good question for next year's team, depending on how this offseason goes. Because I look at the top 10 OPS outfielders in baseball right now, and I look at two guys that were available this offseason that you know, could have, a guy who was traded to the Yankees in Juan Soto, who will be a free agent. And then I also look at Teoscar Hernandez, who was available from the Mariners, who went over to LA. Two guys that, could Jed maybe look at some of these numbers and say, hey, if there's a guy available, we now have the depth to go get one. Are they going to sign Juan Soto? Yeah, probably not. But there's other really good major league outfielders out there that might be available if a team in a smaller market wants to make a move. I mean, I guarantee you most Cubs fans maybe had heard the name Teoscar Hernandez, but really didn't, maybe didn't pay attention to how great he was. But look what he's been, aside from Otani, he's been the Dodgers' second best hitter this year. I mean, dude's lighting it on fire. So if you can go out and find another guy like that, then we can have the say a DH question. Because I agree that there's been some defensive mishaps this year that have, again, that maybe you are a better team if he's DHing and you can get another home run hitter in the outfield.
Yeah. So then when, we're kind of continuing to look at why has this team been playing better? And as I said, whether we're focused on just trying to make a wild card and make the playoffs, doesn't disregard any of the concerns we had coming into the season or how the roster was built or things they didn't address, positions of need, et cetera. And we'll continue to talk about that. And I'm not surprised that, there's a lot of folks in our YouTube chat that kind of have the attitude, when I asked how you feeling, are you bought in? Are you out? Or, how do you feel? There were a lot of replies that were something of the like of, I'm in, but I'm kind of annoyed that it's taken this long and how it kind of played out. And, me too, right? Like, I think we all kind of are. One of those areas is the bullpen. And they obviously struggled at the beginning of the year. And they're in a position right now, Kevin, where it is potentially quite likely that they miss the playoffs. And you can point to any number of games. I mean, it's probably over 20 that were very easily winnable, that you gave away, that you couldn't, you left however many guys on base, you didn't hit with runners in scoring position, or just I don't know what the number even is anymore. The whatever number of blown saves that you had, pick any few of them, and that might be why this team misses the playoffs. And it's hard not to be frustrated about that potential. But as we're going forward here, looking at one of the things that has keyed this turnaround, Kevin, Hector Neris is a wild ride, and I don't have any answers for that. I'm not going to get into that. It is what it is. And as he said the other day, he's like, I'm getting the job done. Like, I've done it before. I'm going to do it again. I don't know. I don't know what to say about the Hector Neris experience. But what has really keyed this turnaround in part for the Chicago Cubs are a few of these guys in this bullpen. And you look at friend of the show, Porter Hodge, a 2.36 ERA. He has been awesome. And when you watch him, he looks awesome. The stuff jumps off the screen. Fastball's electric. The sweeper is electric. That has been so huge that when he came up, getting his first taste of major league action and the way that he has sort of just planted his flag as a member of this bullpen and as someone that Craig Counsell clearly trusts to be that guy to come into key spots, absolutely huge. And then 2 moves by Jed Hoyer that have really stabilized this. One being the Tyson Miller trade that was one of those early pre-deadline trades that was kind of just like, hey, we need a body out there in the bullpen. And with the Cubs, a 1.47 ERA has been magnificent. He was great with the Mariners, a 3.09 ERA when he came over to the Cubs. He has been even better since he has come and joined this Cubs bullpen. And then Jorge Lopez, who was the subject of, that very weird situation in New York. He's throwing his glove in the stands. They're parsing through what he said in the press conference. Just a big mess to end that tenure with the Mets. And a 0.51 ERA in 15 games for the Chicago Cubs. That is one of those things that has helped to stabilize this team. We know the offense is going to be inconsistent. We talked so much in the beginning of the year about how often the starters would pitch games where you felt like they had to be perfect because one mistake, the offense wasn't going to make it up, or the bullpen was going to come in and blow whatever tight lead they had managed to hold. And these 3 guys in particular have made such a big difference in how we feel about this team, taking the starter out, going deeper into games, playing in close games. And as they go forward here in this home stretch, is it going to be like last year and the guys are going to kind of break down because they're getting relied on too much and, they're not necessarily those elite guys? Or are these guys going to keep stepping up? I think that's also going to be one of those things that tells a pretty serious tale of the 2024 Chicago Cubs.
Well, here's the thing. Porter Hodge, let's start there. Porter Hodge has only thrown 26 innings this year, so he's still got a pretty fresh, and man, is his arm electric. You're right. The stuff jumps off the page. I don't think he's going to run out of gas. In a lot of the ways, he's not qualified to qualify for some of these major league rankings yet because he hasn't thrown enough innings. So hopefully that arm stays live and electric when they need him the most because he's one of Craig's most trusted relievers at this moment in time. And why is that? It's because of the sweeper. Him and Tyson Miller both. Nobody, and I mean nobody, is touching Porter Hodge's sweeper right now. The guy, I think this year, I want to say going into yesterday's game, hitters were around 2 for 28 off that pitch. I mean, the swing and miss is crazy with that pitch. Nobody's touching it. Tyson Miller, kind of the same thing. And then Jorge Lopez, another one. Ground balls off the charts. He's not allowing the ball to fly anywhere. I mean, he's keeping it on the infield, and he's striking a lot of guys out. He came in a couple high leverage spots, and he's been unbelievable. A guy that he was good with the Mets. I don't understand that whole situation. You're right, was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And maybe clearly the Mets, maybe they didn't have another way of getting that under control. But this is the thing that I will point to about Jed Hoyer when people want to come for his head. Is he has Jed been successful in his tenure right now? No, because there's not any playoff wins at this moment in time. But he knows how to win on the margins and build these bullpens the correct way and not go pay $100 million for Josh Hader, who's having a tough year. You can find guys, you can develop guys. Cody has talked about it ad nauseum. I want to have a bullpen where I can keep bringing guys up like the Dodgers, like the Braves, like the Guardians, where there's just guys there. Because look at this is the best example I can give. Look at the Phillies last year and the run that they had. Now go tell me if you would remember 3 or 4 of those guys in that bullpen. Just guys that they don't all have to be superstar names. They're not all household names. You just have to have guys that can fill these roles and come up from the minor leagues and maybe not throw all season long where you need a little bit of a replacement. Like Porter Hodge, for example, like just said, 26 innings. His arm is still fresh, and it's going to be fresh through the whole month of September. That is so vital, and Jed has done a really, really good job of finding those guys. Don't come for my head, Chad. I'm pointing it out. Michael Fulmer last year is a great example. Mark Leiter Jr., who they just traded, and they haven't missed him yet. I mean, that's the sign of a guy who has certain things he knows that he's good at, and then there's other things that's a work in progress with the other flaws in the team. But the bullpen has been outstanding, and that's all credit to Jed Hoyer there.
Yeah, I mean, there will come a time where, we evaluate Jed and kind of go through all that. And, but I think as far as making some savvy trades and identifying those things, as we talked about so much, the Michael Busch trade looks great. He looks like a very good player for you and someone that is going to be a staple of your lineup going forward here. Some of these shrewd kind of bullpen moves. And, again, like, I don't think all of us always like that the moves are on that kind of shrewd side. Like, how do I kind of make this work without paying people too much and identify these guys that these other organizations don't want, et cetera. But it's part of the process. As we've talked about, the next step is, you've got to be able to either sign, trade for, or produce on your own those kind of like star level hitters that stabilize that lineup and really put the juice into that lineup for you to be able to blow teams out, as he's talked about a lot. That part is still the box that's not checked. But as far as, being able to make some good value maximizing trades, trading guys at the right time, and getting value out of them, they've shown an ability to do that and identify these guys on the free agent market or the waiver market that can help them and bringing them into your system and helping them. That is one of those things that I think they've shown an ability to do. The next step, it's a big one to get those stars and to, pay the money to those guys, et cetera. But all right, so let's start to wrap up here. As we're recording this, this is obviously live. It is 7:18 in Chicago. The Mets are losing 1-0. So that is something that we can keep an eye on. Only the 5th inning, but that is a team that we want to lose. The Cubs can't gain any ground on that 3rd spot for the rest of the day, though, because the Mets and the Braves are tied. So that's going to stay where it is. And then, as we were doing, kind of looking ahead. So coming up, you've got 3 in Cleveland. Now, Kevin, we were discussing this before as a group in our CHGO Cubs chat. But I do want to make sure the chat, have they played in Cleveland before, the Cubs as a franchise? Any significant games or anything that you can remember the Cubs playing in Cleveland?
Progressive Field?
Yeah.
November? I don't think so. Maybe
I don't think so either. Nothing's coming to mind.
No.
Probably. I don't know. Maybe.
I don't think you were there. Were you? I don't think you've ever even been to Progressive Field.
No, I've never been to Ohio.
Wow.
I'm a Michigan man. I would never go to Ohio.
Yeah. Nothing come to mind. I don't know.
We'll see. I don't know. Maybe the chat will remind us. But you've got 3 in Cleveland, an off day on Thursday. Then you are back for 6 at home with the Blue Jays and the Tigers. That's going to be an interesting homestand as well, because those are 2 teams that, kind of find themselves on the outside of the playoff races, but they're not bad. So that's one of those areas where those are still, teams that have some talent, and we'll see how they are able to play. But
The Tigers,
Tigers
Tigers,
even at 56 and 63, like this isn't it's not the White Sox. That's what I mean. Like
yeah.
at certain, Blue Jays 54 and 64. So they're out of it, but they're not horrible teams, is kind of but they're not teams you can look past on the schedule. Like you're gonna have to dial in for those games. They've got some good players. And then as you go forward, then you're getting into some of those. You're going to wrap up August with a road trip that includes the Marlins, the Pirates, and the Nationals. So it's an interesting stretch here. I will admit I did not expect them to get this close, and there's still a lot of ground to cover. 3 games out when you're behind 4 teams, and you don't own these tiebreakers. It's not going to be easy, and it may it's the type of thing where maybe you can outplay 3 of them by 3 games, but can you outplay all 4 of them by those 3 games? It's tough to do. There's a lot that kind of has to happen and go the Cubs' way. But it does sort of feel like one of those things, Kevin, where you put your head down, you try to play good, clean baseball, and just take care of your own business. You're not going to be able to rely on anybody else to help you here. You can't be scoreboard watching and just rooting for everybody else to lose. You got to put your head down, put blinders on, and just play good baseball and rack up the wins and hope that that's enough to carry you over these teams and sneak into the playoffs here.
I don't know if you have MLB TV, Corey, or not, but my roommate has it, and I've watched a lot of Cleveland this year. They're going to test you on a lot of different levels. They're a very well coached team. They don't make errors. They hit the ball very well. Stephen Kwan, their leadoff hitter, their left fielder, is one of the best contact hitters in all of baseball. He's going to be that. Cleveland doesn't really have a weak point. They went on a pretty bad losing streak a couple weeks ago. I believe it was 7 games, but they've turned it around. They just split with the Twins. They still have a 3.5 game lead in their division. That's not enough. The Twins have been playing pretty good baseball themselves. They are going to be a hungry team, and they're a really good team. They run, like I said, they run the bases well. They don't make errors. Their pitching staff isn't elite. It's not the Phillies. It's not the Dodgers when the Dodgers are healthy. But this is a team that's going to test you. It's a good baseball team, and are you going to, are you going to rise to the challenge? It's a good litmus test. Can the Cubs take 2 of 3 in Cleveland? I think that they can. I don't think a sweep is possible. But you're right. After that, you play the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays, they're an okay team. They got some bats and they've been playing better. I don't think the Tigers are very good at all offensively. So with your starting rotation, I'm not as worried about that. It's possible, man. August is this is a month where you've put yourself in a corner where you really don't have. You can lose a series, but preferably you really need to win every series to end the year. And I know that that's probably not possible, but it's also somewhat possible with the opponents you're playing. And you really have put yourself in that position where you need to. Also, as we were
Right.
recording this, the Pirates dropped their 7th in a row. So
Yes.
they're kind of slipping a little bit farther
Fading.
down
Yeah.
when you face them in a couple weeks.
Yeah, so that's the thing too, when we talk about not just pretending that the beginning of the year didn't happen or anything, which we're not, but that's really where that shows up is you've played yourself into the position where you have got to be kind of perfect
Yeah.
for the rest of the year. And of course it's possible that all these teams lose a bunch of games and it's just this big loser battle for the last wild card spot, but you can't count on that when you're looking at 4 or 5 teams in front of you. Somebody is probably going to do what it takes to get this done. And that's, they earned that with how poorly they played at portions of this season. And that's why everybody was so pissed off. That's why everybody was so pissed off at the front office and the players. And we were coming on here screaming sometimes because we were mad at this team. They should have been better than that. And now this is the effect of that you are in a position where you kind of have to be perfect. Obviously they don't have to win every game they play, but you really can't afford, like you said, to drop some of these series. And you certainly can't afford to not take advantage when you're playing bad teams and teams that are out of the race and teams that you are better than. So
You can't
that's
get
just
swept. You can't get swept.
no, 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 no. So we do have probables. So it is going to be Shota, Assad, and Jamison Tyone in this series. Cleveland, at least looking at the MLB.com website, has Ben Lively, a righty with a 3.59 ERA on Monday, TBD on Tuesday, and then Alex Cobb on Wednesday. So that is what this series is going to look like. As you said, Kevin, this is a good Cleveland team. They play good baseball. They play clean baseball. So
But
that's
the
what you
Cubs
got to
are
do.
hitting them at a good time. I will say that too. Cleveland has kind of scuffled since the All-Star break. You're getting them at the opportune time, not when they were mid-July and firing on all cylinders, because that team in July would have kicked your ass this week. So you're getting them in a good time, which is fortunate.
Yeah. So that I think is what we have for you. It is going to be a very, very interesting stretch run. As we said, I didn't expect to be here. I kind of, you had some of those disappointing losses, and you just sort of expected uh, some of these teams to go on a run and kind of push them out of the race. But then you see something like the Braves lose 7 games in a row, the Mets clowning around, the Cardinals clowning around. And here we are. So 3 out with what did we decide? 43 games. I'm not the math guy on the
Yeah,
show,
they
but
have 43 games left because they
yeah,
are, yes.
3 out, 43 games left, and that's in the thick of it. That's plenty of time to make up 3 games. Um, we'll see what this team is made of, and I do look back at, kind of even before the deadline and when they were struggling, we heard it from all of them, from Dansby, from Ian Happ, from Nico, from Jed, from Carter, from Craig Counsell. In those radio hits, they all said stuff like, we're better than this. We just got to keep our heads together. And, we know the talent we have, and we trust that we're going to play better, and we're feeling better about the lineup. And there were so many times where it fell on deaf ears. Like, people just didn't want to hear it. They were like, great. Like, how about you show it on the field? And, they're playing better baseball. So does that last? Will they be consistent? Will they be good enough to overcome those 3 games? I don't know. But what I do know is that we're all fans of this team. There's a month and a half left, and they are within striking distance of a playoff race. So I'm excited for that. I'm nervous for that. I'm sure I'll be very angry about that at certain points over these next few weeks. But it's better than a lot of the alternatives. So that's what we got. As Pat Hughes always says, fasten those seatbelts, folks. We are in a playoff race. Somehow, some way, we are in a playoff race, and we all got to dial in and do what we can. And I can't wait to get back to Wrigley Field and watch, some exciting baseball. These last few years have sucked with, just meaningless, bad baseball. Wrigley, a quarter empty in September and stuff like that. And, one day, 1 week, Kevin, we could be having a conversation next week, and they could be 7 games out, and we've given up on this, and whatever. They could be in the playoffs by the end of next week. Like, that's just the position that they're in. That's what this kind of season and this volatility is going to bring. So, as always, tune in to Cody, Luke, Ryan, if they come back, from vacation or whatever, to help Cody out. We'll see if they do.
Yeah, where's Ryan at? I wonder where he's
I
going.
don't know.
Took a vacation. He's
Yeah,
earned. He's earned it. Cody,
he has earned it.
Cody's done a great job though. They'll have a whole week of shows, and I'm sure they're going to be riding the emotional rail every single night. I know Luke has put his feet in. This team doesn't have a chance, but Cody might just drag him back in, kind of like he did with me. If you read Cody's Twitter and you read the CHGO Cubs Twitter account, you might find yourself in the optimistic category this week. And you know what? Win a series. That's all I'm going to say. Win a series. Don't lose series, and don't get swept. That's where you're at.
Yeah. They don't have to be great. They don't have to be one of the best teams in the league. They just have to be better than a few other middling teams in the National League for about 5 weeks, and that'll get them in the playoffs. So, Are they capable of that? Can they do it? We'll find out. And as you guys know, the CHGO Cubs team will be here to guide you through it all. Post-game shows, articles from Jared and Ryan over at allchgo.com. We'll keep you covered. So we appreciate you joining Kevin and I here on this fine Cubs baseball list Sunday. Brendan and I will talk to you next Sunday. As always, tune in throughout the week for your post-game show needs. We will talk to you again soon. And as always, go Cubs.
We all silly like the mayor.